Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome, everybody, to Nightlight. So glad you could join us tonight. It's the end of a 7-week marathon we've been going through with Gary Wayne on his new book, Genesis 6 Conspiracy, Book 2. Part 2, sorry. And it's been an adventure, absolutely, and an education beyond belief. And I can't tell you how much I have learned from going through the book segment by segment by segment and having Gary talk about each segment after I had read it. So for those of you that are just tuning in, that's the best way to do this. Read the section, listen to the show, go back and read the section again, and find everything you missed the first time through. And just a little bit about this, as was graphically described in the first Genesis 6 conspiracy book. There are giants among us, passing largely unnoticed, intent on carrying out secret plans to enslave all of humanity. They may not look like giants today, but their bloodlines and DNA extend all the way back to the Nephilim, the offspring of angels who mated with human women, described in Genesis 6, when giants were roaming the land. Now in this new work, Gary gives in-depth with new information and explanations for each premise laid out in the first book. By adding this fact-filled book to your understanding, you'll be able to clearly understand and articulate how we are living in the end of time. This book was written to help answer the lingering questions many Christians have and to provide scripturally researched answers and data points for those questions. The Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2 explores Scripture's accounting of prehistory, history, and its important prophetic connections, and explains in layman's terms how it all fits together in deciphering the end of time. And it has been an adventure for sure. So welcome to the show, Gary. So glad you were with me again tonight. And just a note for everybody, we're going to do this same process with his first book in the fall. So watch for that. We'll certainly give you way ahead of time notice, because that's an 8-week section book. But for tonight, we're going to tie this all up with a great big ribbon. Right, Gary?
Yeah, I think so. And thank you for having me for the last 7 weeks. It's been very enjoyable and hopefully enlightening and raising some curiosity as to what's actually in the Bible that most people sort of overlook. So, and also very much looking forward to coming back and doing that with book 1, because that book is as unique as book 2, but in a different way. So, yeah, so very happy to be back and looking forward to bringing the book to its conclusion tonight in a section that's called the Fig Tree Generation. So this section is essentially all prophecy, and we're going to talk about that and how it connects back to prehistory, and maybe talk a little bit about the chronology of what we can sort of look forward to in terms of how the end time might play out.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found in reading through all of this was that you spoke of the beast empire and the beast religions and the beast empires, and you know and they are yet to come. And you know, when I think of beasts, I think of monsters, and does the Bible literally mean monsters are going to be coming back, or is it people with monstrous spirits inside of them that are evil as heck?
Yeah, so when you take that word beast back to the Greek meaning in the New Testament, it means, you know, a wild animal or savage beast, and that's also understood allegorically with a beast spirit, and that people who slander the angels in heaven and the throne of God, they do that like brutal beasts, as it's talked about in the Bible. And so that's akin to that Antichrist beast spirit that is always lurking, that is out there. And even as it was in the time in the time of the writing of the epistles of John, where it talks about this spirit that's always lurking. And it's an Antichrist spirit that is wanting to take over a Antichrist wannabe throughout the beast empires. And it's an important sort of concept that this has been with us from the beginning. So one deduces there would be an Antichrist type spirit and an Antichrist wannabes before the flood that were part of the wars that led to the culmination in God bringing a flood, so the world's not going to be completely destroyed by fire, as we talked about in the last show, as 2 Peter 3 talks about, and that's the same fire that's reserved for this end time. So, with the beast empires after the flood that we talk about in Book 2, and these are empires that are like world empires, at least of the known world of that time, from sort of the Middle East and European sort of understanding of it. And these beast empires are described as a beast in Daniel 7. So it's these beasts that are blown up from the sea, the Gentile sea, so the Gentile nations from where the bloodlines rule, the bloodlines of the giants, and that these are the four winds that blow them up, and they form. And there's going to be, from the time of Daniel forward, you have, starting with Babylon, you're going to have Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and the end time empire, and then the eighth beast empire, which is Antichrist taking over at the midpoint of the last 7 years. And all of these beast empires, and understand that word beast is you should apply that to the empires as is described as that beast coming up out of the sea, also in Revelation 13, and described in the exact same way in Revelation 12 and Revelation 17. And so it's like this Leviathan type creature with multiple heads, or a Hydra dragon that's coming up out of the sea as this as a beast empire. And all of these beast empires past have had many Antichrist wannabes that are trying to get control of the world empire and to bring about the end time before it's ordained time, after God permits it, when all the names fulfilled in the book of life to that point in time, because there's a millennium period where there's going to be those additional names, but for this period are fulfilled. Everybody has a chance to keep their names from being blotted out of the book of life. And so Michael is the one that holds them back. He fights against Persia and then Greece, as the prophecies go in the book of Daniel. So it's important to understand that there's a beast spirit and there are beast empires that are trying to bring about this showdown with God. before the end time. And they're trying to wipe humankind from the face of the earth so that we're not going to be resurrected and to be like angels, but be as the inheritors of eternity with angels serving us, and that we would judge these fallen angels for creating these spurious offspring to do the dirty work, to lead us into absolute destruction. And so those players that are the visible ones, the spurious offspring, are still doing the invisible ones beckoning and answering to the counsel of gods that we've talked about in the past. And that they believe, and I know the fallen angels already know after Christ's resurrection, and he spoke to the most vicious ones of the fallen angels in the pit prison in 1 Peter 3, that I think he went there to announce that when he resurrects on the Sunday, that because he's there during the time of 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. And so he goes to visit them at that time, these fallen angels in the pit prison. And he's telling them that when I resurrect on Sunday, which they didn't anticipate, otherwise they wouldn't have had him or their counterparts that are ruling the world from the assembly of the gods that we've talked about in past shows. Psalms 82, where you get that passage over the 70 nations, Deuteronomy 32 and Exodus 1:5, and as listed in Genesis 10 and 1 Chronicles for the 70 nations. That they are ruling over that, and they're still telling their spurious offspring that they can win. And so they're bringing about this end time. And so they want this showdown, and they would like to do it before the ordained time. And so it's Michael who prevents not the beast empire from coming in the book of Daniel, but from preventing Antichrist from taking power. Now, a lot of people think that that's the restrainer. I would agree with that. That 2 Thessalonians 2 talks about. But also people ought to think that the actual restrainer is the Holy Spirit. So I'm fine either way. I used to think Holy Spirit. I lean more towards Michael these days because it just sort of fits better with the prophecies. And so we're going to see these empires passed again as a beast empire rise up, which is in Kings, and it's going to come out of the old Roman Empire, and it's going to be an actual world global empire involving all of the different empires or states under 10 specific emperors. So they're going to have regional empires that are going to form this world government as Babylon comes about. So you have the beast empire. You have the beast that's described as an Antichrist type figure. And then you have the beast religion, which is the polytheist religion that has been part of the beast empires, the 7 empires past, and the Enochian mysticism, as I like to call it, the religion of Atlantis, whatever you want to call the different versions of polytheism that were before the flood. They have a root pantheon and a root religion that in Gnostic and Masonic traditions go back to Enoch, son of Cain, who created the original mysticism from the 7 sciences he learned from Adam, and then partnered as their descendants, supplying daughters to create the giants, and then using this religion and this development of the technology to usurp control of the world with these Nephilim kings as the rulers and Rephaim kings after the flood. And that's the organizational structure that's coming back again today. So look for this same ancient religion to come about, and that would be the beast religion. So we need to understand that word, the concept of the word beast, that it refers to the religion, it refers to the empires and the empires that are coming, and it refers to a specific Antichrist beast, even though there would be Antichrist wannabes before that. And then within the understanding of the beast religion, you have to understand that sort of in a compartmentalized form as well. Otherwise, you're not going to make sense of all of the details. So it's important to do that.
Yeah, it just, to me, I understand all the Cain stuff. But on the other hand, we have Seth, and Seth a part of the beast system, or it just seemed to me that Seth was the good guy, and Cain was the bad guy, and so that Seth's line wouldn't necessarily have been intermingled with the Nephilim, or was his line also corrupted?
Well, certainly in the first 6 or 7 generations, you would look at it as likely not being corrupted or intermarrying with the Cainite lines or the Nephilim after the creation of the Nephilim. And we're told that Enos is the one, son of Seth, is the one that returns to God and starts that, continues with that genealogical connection from Adam down to Noah to Abraham that is tracked through the Bible in terms of this line where the Messiah is going to come from. But at a certain point, as I cover off in book 1, is that in the generation of Lamech and then Noah coming forward in the Seth line, at that point you have a complete corruption that's going to happen over the last generation of the Sethian line. And so the whole world becomes corrupted. Yeah. And so then only Noah and his 3 sons and then the wives are deemed worthy enough from a genealogical non-corruption and from spiritual non-corruption to be worthy to cross the flood. And I think they probably carry the genes through the wives for the 4 races. My speculation, but there has to be some way we have all the races show up after the flood. So likely through the wives and through the matriarchal descent thereafter. And so, you have this whole world that is being corrupted, and it's going to start anew. But again, these organizations, religious, the royal organizational structure, the army structure, the educational structure is going to cross the flood again, and we're going to see giants again, and they're going to reassert that dominance after the flood, and it's been with us all the way through. So, but we're coming, I think, if we're in the fig tree generation, and I think that we probably are, then we're going to start to see events start to move us into that direction of the last 7 years. But I do not think we're in the last 7 years yet.
Well, that's good. I mean, so there's time for redemption. So what happens? I mean, looking at the world today, it's hard to conceive of it being divided into 10 kingdoms. How does that happen?
Well, I think we're starting to see some of that, and that's one of the reasons why we don't want to get ahead of biblical chronology, because, every time there's an eclipse or there's this or there's that, people are saying, we're in the last 7 years or the rapture's happening, and, it's just not good to do things without having full biblical support, without any contradictions. So we want to be careful of that. So how do we get to these great empires? Well, we need to think about, first of all, is that these bloodlines are around today that have been around since the beginning, after the flood and before the flood. And so, we get in the end time that I cover off in section 6, a connection through the New Testament that the kings and the great men of the book of Revelation, when it's talking about those groups in Revelation 6 and Revelation 19 and 18, that goes back to the Greek word mega, and it has an etymology and a meaning that goes back to, of great stature, of great age, of great height, of great size, large, huge, a chief, weighty, as in stout, as we've covered off, that they were quite wide. and of a bloodline descendant. And also from Megastanes, which also means, that's where great men comes from. And it's understood as lords and nobles and chiefs and leaders, and connected back to the grandees as you take the etymology back from Megistos, which means very great, the greatest. And from its application in Old Greek, where the grandees was an idea of a kingdom or an empire. And so that word grandees has its own separate, distinct meaning, also means lofty and majestic and old pedigree and big and genealogical. So we have that connection that these are the same things that are talked about in the Old Testament with the Rephaim and the various kinds of the giants, with the Gibborim, or the mighty ones, just as you have the mighty ones, that are talked about in Joel 1, 2, and 3 for the large two major wars of the end time, and also in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is connected to that first war before the midpoint of the last 7 years. And in other passages as well, but just to give a couple of examples, that's the Greek cognate version of some Hebrew words, and that we need to sort of line up if we're going to match up the New Testament with the Old Testament, because they were, the scriptures were written in a way that we could make that linkage if we took the time to make that sort of happen. So how do these 10 empires run up? Well, first, let's look behind the political scenes that run this world, that is still run by these visible ones, even though they're not directly as a president of a company. They're still the money of the country and the power of the country. And we do have some ones that are quite visible still, like with the Windsors, which was the Hanover line out of Germany that replaced the Stuart lines. And you still have the Stuart descendants around as well. And you have the Anjou, and you have bloodlines all over the world. And you have a president in China named Xi, Xi. And even though China was brought down on that bloodline, the Dragon Kings from the Shah dynasty, which produced two sort of royal names of Li and Xi. Xi, Xi being the western branch of the Shah XIA bloodline that President Xi comes from. And he has dynastic intentions, as he's showing. And so down the road, we're going to see him expand that empire. You have places like Putin who are empire-driven. And so he's going to continue to try and expand his empire. You could look at Persia as being part of Iran, or even include India on that. And Iran is trying to expand their dominance. And so it's through this shuffling of the geopolitical things that are going on today, but a shuffling and a pushback to the Western European bloodlines, who have their own vision that they're trying to impose on the world of these 10 groups of nations that the Club of Rome that I talk about in Book 1 and in Book 2, that divided the world up into these 10 groups of nations. And it's the same, or not the same, but very, very similar to the same groups that the United Nations has broken the world up. And it's the same number that's in biblical prophecy, whether it's in the book of Daniel or it's in the book of Revelation. And so look for that pushback against the Europeans. And it's not that bloodlines around the world are against this Nephilim world order that I like to call the NWO. Or the Nephilim world order, whichever way you want to do that. It's that they don't see that they want a world set up under European dominance. And so they're saying we want a larger role, and we're going to take a larger role. So I think we're going to see that get stronger. And you can kind of look at some of those nations that are grouping together that are going to push back. And in Daniel 2, in the metallic empires, which matches up perfectly with the Daniel 7 and the beast empires, you have 10 toes coming out of the iron legs of the Roman Empire, and it was split into two halves. The old Roman Empire of Constantinople as a Eastern capital and Rome as the Western capital, and there's a split after the fall of the Roman Empire in about 1000 AD over some doctrinal issues. And you see this Greek Orthodox Church is being sort of invited to cozy up to Putin and his empire-driven agenda. So you might see some organizational structure start to rise with that as well, with different kinds of religions that are being in partnership with these rising empires. So I think we're going to see more of that as they push back. But I think before you get to that level, that the world is going to say, okay, we're going to agree to 10 potentates, dictators, royal dictators, kings. There's going to have to be a lot of catastrophes first. So you're going to have wars and rumors of wars. You're going to have earthquakes. You're going to have famine, and you're going to have pestilence. Those are the sorrows that are talked about in Jesus' chronology in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 17, and 21 of the end time, where he gives a sequential event of the first 3.5 years and then the major events of the last 3.5 years that works perfectly as your template for all prophecy, and in particular the book of Revelation, which is his testimony that he provided to an angel to show John in a vision. So it has to fit. It just can't sort of ignore it. It has to fit in. Otherwise, the Bible is in conflict. But when you let it fit, it just fits in really kind of easily. So we're going to need those contrived catastrophes, and we're going to need, as Jesus foretells, that we're going to need false prophets who are going to be running amok out there, so to speak, with all of these prophecies of doom that they're able to predict, not because they're prophets, because they're contrived. That, in other words, those running the world are going to bring these catastrophes on us. It would be like the last pestilence. They're man-made, and they're going to be deployed. However they become deployed, but the false prophets are able to predict them, so one would suspect there is a timetable and a plan on how to work together on that, so to speak. And so those are going to get stronger as we get through the fig tree generation. And so all of that's going to have to come together so that the false prophets can bring about the unification of the universal religion that is going to be the glue and the sponsor for this 7-year covenant reigned over by these 7 kings. So look for the false prophets, look for the rise of Babylon, and in that mix of calamities and catastrophe, you're going to start to see more wars and rumors of wars and empire building, and it's going to look apocalyptic. You know, as you get into the last 7 years with the seal openings, you're going to have 25% destruction of the whole world. And yet, if you had a destruction today of 5%, people would say that's Armageddon. And Revelation 6 isn't Armageddon, and that people are going to be saying, we're going to destroy ourselves from the face of the earth, so we need to come together. And we're going to start to see that drumbeat get stronger.
Well, when you speak of Babylon, I know you're speaking of ancient Babylon, but is it also sort of relating to large cities like Babylon around the world beginning to fester? I mean, is it just the one area that is going to be really the main area, or are you seeing the same type of corruption and destruction in all areas of the world?
It's a really good question. It's a really good question. Yeah, I was wondering whether it was a cat or not, but it's a really good question, because we're told like Babylon is a city 9 times in the book of Revelation. And so Babylon is going to be a city So it's going to be like the capital of the world, but you're also going to have 10 capitals around the world. So it's going to be a universal religion and a mystery religion as it's described in the language that is described in Revelation 17. And that this is the mother religion, and the religions of the beast empires past were more or less daughters of Babylon. So expect daughters of this religion in the 10 empires to be part of that organizational structure that's amongst those 10 empires that have 10 kings. And so, yeah, I would expect to have similar kinds of locations around the world, but it's going to be Babylon specific as the mother. She's described in Revelation 17 will have one central world location that she's going to exert her geopolitical nature over as well, because she's going to control these 10 kings. And she's going to be the one that is the glue to bring this empire about. And so this is going to be a geopolitical operation as well. And you're also going to have Babylon understood as a economic system as well. It's a beast system that is being put in place for Antichrist. And so this beast system that Babylon will put up, she will grow rich from this trade, probably take a tribute, as the conspirators say they're going to put on, as like a value-added tax or a transaction fee on everything that's going to happen electronically that will be like a tribute to the Babylon religion. So, yes, you should look for other locations that are part of the capitals, but also different holy sites as well that would be connecting back to the central site of Babylon, that this religion, this economic system, this political entity is going to work from, and as I say, from a specific city.
Okay, because it just seemed to me Babylon seemed to relate to more than just one part of the world, that we would all have our own Babylon, so to speak.
Well, yeah, and I would describe Babylon as like this umbrella religion that is going to try and bring all other religions under this one umbrella. So in polytheism, it's kind of this old religion where you have different vernacular names for the gods. You have, local rituals that, similar but maybe a little bit unique or specific to a specific culture. But it's the same religion. So you can imagine that you could have under that umbrella like a different sort of sect of this religion. So it's kind of like how we might look at Islam today, where you have the Sunnis and the Shia as different sects, for example, or Protestantism and Catholicism under Christianity. And so I would look at each of those empires to have a representative of that type of religion, but it may have some uniqueness to it, but at the core, at the adept level of the mystery religion, they're all worshiping the same gods. It may have some rituals and things that are sort of mass opium for the masses, so to speak, and the more secretive part of the rituals would still be kept at the adept level, but it's going to be showing to be like a tolerant religion that's accepting all religions, because all of the leaders of the churches and the adepts, they know that they're worshiping the same pantheon of the gods. And so under that, you can expect a rebuilt Christianity. You can expect a rebuilt Islam. You could expect a rebuilt Judaism. And that comes through the mystical side of those religions. In other words, Gnostic Christians. In other words, the Sufis, which is the mystical side of Islam that the August Khan leads. or Kabbalism and Essenism, which is the polytheist side or the mystical side of Judaism. And those are going to take more front and center as they make war against the doctrine of the monotheist religions and try and bring them back into what they would call the true religion of polytheism that went rogue beginning with Moses, which all three monotheist religions sort of connect back into. And they're also going to have to de-deify Jesus through that process.
Gary, while Barbara is dealing with the cats, there might be some kind of ritual going on back there, but we'll say that for when she gets back. But when you're talking about the rebuilt religions, is that moving further away from the original source? Are we getting a watered down version? You do bring up in part one with the Nazi replacing the established Christianity with the earlier pagan religions, or
Ariosophy.
Would we be watering down the original sources?
Yeah, it would be kind of akin to what you're saying with the Nazi religion, which was theosophy that put Arianism and real ideology and Grail ideology into the mix and changed it to Ariosophy. So Arian Sophia. Arians love Sophia, as you would take that back to its original meaning. And that it was de-deifying Jesus in this case and making him a prophet in the religion, but not Messiah. And it was about raising the leader to a Messiah-like status. And it was trying to reestablish as that religious organizational structure of the ancient Aryans that they believed were their descendants and were the giants. They're blonde-haired, blue-eyed in their version. And that would be sort of a similar sort of slant that you might see going around the world with these different sort of variations. And again, just imagine a dominant sort of level after you've worked through the prophets to scare people away. You have all of this so-called evidence that's going to destroy monotheism and bring it back into the religion of Heliopolis that Moses was originally educated in before being converted back to his Israelite roots, so to speak, and to lead the Exodus. Is that they're going to try and keep those sects, but turn it into the polytheist side of those religions. So they will play the more dominant role and will make a very sort of plausible, maybe not that super deep, but it'll be deep enough with evidence and miracles and expectations of apocalypse that people are going to flock to this religion lest they be destroyed from the face of the earth. And so when we look at the Mary apparitions that are going on within the Catholic Church, whether it started with Lourdes and I'm trying to remember the other one right now. It's just eluding me right now. Fatima, that's it, yes. And with Mary apparitions, let's say at Medjugorje is more recent. In the last recent one, I mean, they did some prophecies in those previous ones, but in this set of apparitions in the 90s, there were children that were initiated, and they're going to come out at a specific date. They were assigned in that initiation by this apparition to go out to the world as prophets to say, convert to the one true religion, or to be destroyed from the face of the earth, and you'll get some warnings. So we'll give you one, and these catastrophes are going to get stronger. And this vision of Mary is depicted as a depiction of the ancient Queen of Heaven. This is the same depiction as in the sign in Revelation 12. And they're saying it's the woman of Revelation 12 to sort of bring the Bible sort of back into it. There are apparitions going around the world these days. They're not widely reported, but you have these different queens of heaven, of these ancient goddesses that are appearing, and they're doing similar kinds of promises. And so one would expect a merging of these types of things. And in the meantime, before we get to that point, you have the Roman Church, which is trying to reunite Christianity through compromising of church doctrine to come under one sect of Christianity. You have the Roman Church reaching out to Muslims and Judaism, and in Abu Dhabi, they're actually trying to set up this unification of monotheism, as we understand monotheism from its literal sense, and that they're making overtures from the Vatican as well to the Buddhist religions and other religions around the world. So they're playing a large role in laying that groundwork, and it's all about compromising organized religions, rituals, and doctrines to sort of come into more of a common ground and eliminating the stuff that isn't common ground. And look for more of that to go in conjunction. So we're going to see this developing from many different sides and angles. But yeah, it's going to, we can see it already starting, but it's going to take those contrived catastrophes and the false prophets to really drive it home, I think.
But Gary, hasn't the Mary cult been around for a very, very long time? I mean, underground, certainly, but, you know, the Masons and the Templars and, you know, the Earth Mother and a lot of the practitioners, the pagan practitioners, they're into the mother. They're into the female goddess more than the male.
They are. And so when they look at Mary as mother of Jesus, they would allegorize that as being the mother of God, right? So that mother goddess aspect, just as Sophia created the 12 archons in Gnosticism. And Mary Magdalene is considered as a queen of heaven as well as the wife of Jesus, God, as they would reevaluate that versus the Word of God. And even though Jesus is the absolute reflection of El Elyon, there's a distinction that's talked about in the Bible as the Word of God that became flesh at God's command, and the Word created all things at God's command. And that just as the Holy Spirit, Ruach, is distinct as well and acts in a singular nature as well as working all three together. So just so that people, I won't go through the whole doctrine of it, but just so you know, I'm not saying that Jesus isn't part of the tripart nature and isn't the reflection of God or all the descriptions in the Bible. It's putting them all together to get the fullest understanding of it. And so, yeah, they look at that mother of God or that queen of heaven, and Babylon, the woman, is called the queen of heaven in the Old Testament. And so, again, you have sacrifices in the book of Jeremiah being sacrificed to the queen of heaven with some backsliding of some of the Judeans. And this queen of heaven is a constant around the world. So you have with the offspring gods, and we've covered that off in detail as being separate and distinct from the parent god. So the offspring gods are after the flood. You would have as a queen of heaven, Isis, or another queen of heaven, and Isis was the partner of Osiris and ruled after the flood. You would have had like Inanna as a queen of heaven from the Sumerian tradition. You could put Anat in there, and before the flood, Ashtaroth. So they have counterparts of Queen of Heavens that ruled before the flood, because the offspring gods who took over the mythos, the title, and the authority as they moved up as being part of the army of rebellious angels, the Hebrew Saba being an army of angels, so they have rank and order. And so this is an ancient belief system, And even as early in about the 600s, 4 to 600s, in the Roman Church, you have this elevation beginning with elevating Mary to be Mary, Mother of God status, and almost a millennia or more of and more of adding to that doctrine to raise Mary to being a status unlike any other human other than Jesus. In fact, being raised up to like a Jesus-like status in that doctrine. I document all of that in book 2. So, yes, this is a worldwide understanding of the Queen of Heaven that is going to be coming back. And appropriately, we're told about this woman that rides the beast of empires in Revelation 17, and she's called the Queen of Kingdoms, the Queen of Empires. And there's none like her until she's destroyed in both Testaments. So it's important to understand it, but to also understand it from a polytheist side as to how those belief systems are going to be brought together under that kind of imagery. And the source of, at least according to the ones that I've researched with the Mary apparitions and some other ones, that they supply the prophecies for these false prophets, and that will stem out of that angelic technology that we're being fed today that's catching us up to the same level of technology before the flood, so that they can create these disasters and wars and signs and miracles to cattle herd everybody into the universal religion and the world government. That'll be the 10 kings.
Well, this is more of an absorption rather than a destruction.
Yeah. But there will be destruction to drive people in that direction.
Yeah.
But from the religious aspect, it's an absorption of the religions, yes.
Because it seems to me it's like waking up all of the gods of the past and upgrading them to current time to then become part of the whole of this universal religion.
Exactly. And once you have a release of the pit prison just before the midpoint, it's going to come face to face with all of those currently angels running this world and the Babylon religion, and then Antichrist is going to overthrow the Babylon religion and replace it.
Not easily, though, it appears. Because it calls for battles all over the place.
Yes, but the actual destruction of Babylon happens in an hour, as it's described. So it happens quickly, so probably in a day. And that'll be the main city. What happens if there's other centers around the world, we're not told. But one presumes that with the power that Antichrist will exert, everything will come back into line. But on the rise to power of Antichrist, he's going to overthrow 3 of the empires. And also, the 10 kings are going to hand their power over to Antichrist. So he's going to turn on 3 of the probably most richest ones, as it's talked about in the book of Daniel, to redistribute that plunder. And this all happens in an hour as well. So there will be wars, but there will be wars that will lead up to that point as well before Antichrist starts to exert his pressure. So when we talked about that Revelation 9 war in the last show in section 6, we lined that up with Joel 1 and 2 and Ezekiel 38 and 39. This happens before the midpoint, and Antichrist is going to take credit for winning that war. Whether or not he actually does that or not, we'll have to wait and see, because that army is going to be destroyed. The Gog army is going to be destroyed on the mountains of Israel. It's going to look like Armageddon, and he's going to claim that to be Armageddon so that he can complete his counterfeiting of Jesus' credentials and to come before. So there will be that significant war, but there's going to be wars and stuff before. It's going to be horrific, I think, as you get closer to it, as the wars get stronger. It's just that the degree of destruction that gets hit, starting with 25% in the, at about the start of the last 7 years, and then before the midpoint, you've got, with that big war, you've got 33% destruction, and then Antichrist takes power, and then in the last year, the year of the Lord's wrath, it's going to culminate with Armageddon, and all flesh would be destroyed. So there's going to be, as you say, all of that happening, both to bring Babylon to power, and then as Babylon starts to lose its grip on the world and then is ultimately destroyed, then a bit of a pause, then some more wars as you get into what Antichrist is going to be doing throughout the last 3.5 years. That's going to lead to the Armageddon battle.
Knowing that God has power to do, well, like what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah, knowing that God has the ability to do that, why put humanity and even the angels, why make them fight it out instead of just snapping his fingers, so to speak, and doing away with them? Why is it necessary for the battles?
And you could say that throughout history, right? The same thing to make the same kind of point, but this would be even a larger sort of underscoring of why would God permit this to happen. He does because he loves us so much that he wants us to choose through free choice. And all of these things aren't his doing. He's just permitting it to play out so that all of us who have been given the gift of life have the opportunity to choose God and choose eternity or not. And so what happens in this world is because of the corruption of the rebellious fallen angels and because of the spurious ones, both before and after the flood, that run this world, that are driven by war and destruction and the destruction of humankind. But it has to play out that way so that more people can survive into eternity. So it's not that God would want it this way. And he has given several intercessions to try and make it not that way. So, it began with the creation of, Adam and Eve as the resolution to the angelic rebellion. But Eve decided, and Adam, they decided not to listen. So you start the process that you're going to have our destiny played out through the curses of the covenants versus the blessings of the covenant. And then you're going to have a restart with Noah after the flood. And quickly things get turned over to the giants and polytheism again, and God creates Abraham, and that's going to eventually bring Israel, and he creates the Holy Covenant for Israel, and they have a choice to follow his way and have a better destiny than what ultimately had befallen them or us. But they chose not to, and they violated the covenant. So we're seeing the fulfillment through the curses of the covenant. It still gets done, but it need not be this way. But he has left it up to us on this earth to make our own choices, and so that those who choose eternity will be loyal going forward. Just as you have fallen angels who are already created immortal and knew God intimately, they still rebelled. And even in the millennium, you're going to have Jesus reigning. There's going to be all the fallen angels gone, all the demon spirits gone. And at the end of the millennium, humans are going to rebel just like the fallen angels did, and led by the same leader, Satan. So that's sort of the humbling sort of aspect to show us that, you're being raised higher through your faith and little knowledge based on intimate knowledge to earn your eternity to be like those angels. But ultimately, unless, the wisdom and the laws are written on your spirits, you're not going to be able to, and on your hearts, you're not going to be able to, go through without rebellion, and or you have to choose God to be able to get there, to show you that you have that loyalty once you are created immortal with new bodies. So it's all for a purpose, and it need not be this way. And it's because of the fallen angels that they want this to happen, because they hate humankind, but they don't get their blood on their own hands. That's why they created their spiritual offspring, because they know how powerful God is. And so the giants were created from the beginning, and whatever other creatures they would have created. And again, after the flood, in that same type of violations to the laws of creation as what was done before the flood. And their goal was to wipe Israel from the face of the earth and not let the Messiah plan to come about to somehow save humankind, so that they could justify their rebellion and have a realm on their own away from God. And they would make oikotarians, as we've talked about, dwelling places for the spirit. We might know that as a modern term of sleeves in the show that Altered Carbon talked about, or as cloned bodies, a soul and a body of the physical world of some form, so that the disembodied spirits of the giants could dwell in that and interact physically. So they can destroy this world, in their opinion, and have their spirit offspring destroy this world. And that if they were to justify their rebellion that way and have a realm on their own, they could supply another oikotarian for the counterfeit spirits of the giants that were received through the procreation of the celestial mafia godfathers with human females, and in the polytheist version with males as well through mother goddesses. So, yeah, it need not play out this way, but it has, and it's going to continue. But ultimately, God is greater than free choice, and as Alpha Omega, He knows every which way it could have opted out, but He let angels and He let humans choose all the way through.
So after the 1,000 years of peace, humanity rebels again?
Yeah, what happens is Satan is released from the pit prison. He's the only one that's not gone to the lake of fire. And so what he does is there's a little season, and we don't know quite how long that is. You could look at a season as being 3 months, as it comes out of Greek, or a period of time that's not quite defined, whereas it's used specifically in Revelation 6 as the time as the martyred saints are told to wait a little longer for the other martyred saints that are going to come out of the tribulation of the saints in the first 3.5 years. They're told to wait a little season longer, and we can measure that at 3.5 years at sort of the outset. So a small period of time after he's released, he's going to cause a great rebellion against Jesus' throne in Jerusalem, and they're going to march on Jerusalem with this great army to try and overthrow Jesus and God. And of course, that has the same result as what happens at Armageddon. And then you get the last of the resurrections and the judgments that are going to happen after that, and then a new earth and a new heavens are created for eternity.
Okay, so Jesus is on planet for 1,000 years?
Yeah, he's going to reign 1,000 years in direct opposite of how the world was run since the time of Adam.
Just doesn't make sense. I mean, first the Israelites rebel and rebel and rebel and rebel, and then New Testament comes and it's the Christians who are rebelling and rebelling and rebelling.
We are a stiff-necked species. There's no doubt about it.
What is wrong with us?
Well, and there's a parable that Jesus talks about, and it's the one that Christians might know of as Abraham's bosom, where he talks about, people coming back after dying and testifying to them about what can happen in this parable. And that even if some people, and the parable is essentially saying that even if somebody were to come back from the dead and tell you what's going to happen, you people wouldn't listen or believe. And then Jesus actually comes back from the dead, and not, some in the world believe, but not all. And then others are using the belief system for their own gain. And it's just amazing that God has such patience with us.
Well, I know you talk of false prophets, and I know of one that is already here, and he calls himself Atreya, and he's in Great Britain. Are there going to be more walking around that are claiming that they are Jesus?
And did you say the name Maitreya starting with an M?
It's either Maitreya or Atreya. I'm not sure which.
Okay, well, there's a general term as Lord Maitreya with an M is sort of the title or a name that comes out of Hinduism for this new Buddha that's coming back. So an incarnation of the Buddha, right? So the same type of title. So I would look at that not probably as the person's name, but a title that he's taking because he knows the prophecies out of the Hindu and Buddhist religions. So, yeah, there will be lots of false Christs coming along, as well as false prophets, and we need to be aware of that as well. So, again, it's going to become very, very confusing, and that's the whole point, is to deceive people with all of these different false prophets, all of these false Christs, so that when Antichrist makes his play, he's going to say, I'm the one, and I won this counterfeit Armageddon battle. So what we're going to see is so much of this kind of thing that it's just going to blow our minds. And we're going to see things that there have powers to do things that will seem real. And some of it will be real. Some of it will be contrived. But it will not be things that are outside of the laws that God set down in the universe. Only the God Most High could do something that with a sign in the sky that would be completely out of the order of what you could predict, like an eclipse or something like that. It would be something akin to, let's say, the star of Bethlehem that stayed over and shone brighter over the town of Bethlehem, signifying the coming birth of Jesus. And stars don't do that. And so it would have to be signs like that from God. But what we're told to be aware of is these miraculous things, miraculous powers that they're going to be gifted, and they're going to be used as avatars by fallen angels and by demons in more of a demonic possession as well with some of them. And they're going to produce things that are going to deceive a lot of people. And it's going to be very, very confusing. We cannot imagine the things that are going to be coming at us. If we think what we're saying now is wrong and off in so many ways, it's just begun. This is going to look like the good old days.
Yeah, I the element of the miracles, I can see faith healing because they're already faith healers, and they can be very impressive. And those I understand. Those I understand, but when it comes to working real miracles, that I don't know, levitation. I know the Buddha was able to teleport from one side of a river to the other side of the river. So, things like that. But we've got magicians out there that can make elephants disappear. So it would have to be very profound in order for anybody to really be impressed by it, I would think. I can't imagine what.
Yeah, and there's going to be distinctions, right? There's going to be what could be done by angelic technology within the laws of the universe, like portals, right? So expect expect that to be on display as well. And they're going to take that level of technology and additional powers and create spectacular miracles, it will seem like. But understand, miracles that are going to be done by the 144,000 or the two witnesses in the last 7 years are going to be completely above and beyond what these other prophets can do. And just as Jesus' sign that's coming in the sky at his first of his visitations is going to be, and one presumes he might do it at his other visitations as well, but it will be something that could not be duplicated.
Well, I know there are, the sightings of the Virgin Mary, but I haven't heard of, yet there may be, but I haven't heard of them, of any sightings of Jesus. Is that going to be one of the things we're going to be hearing about?
Well, in two formats. One, as you mentioned, as people claiming themselves to be the Messiah or Messiah-like figure. But also they'll be presenting themselves something in the sky to counterfeit it because they're Antichrist, right? They're trying to replace Christ. They're trying to be there before Christ. And so they're going to have similar types of credentials, but probably none more spectacular than Antichrist would have as his counterfeit. So again, we might expect to see a rising level of those types of signs of Jesus coming back, through first, pretty impressive ones to something that will deceive even the elect if that were possible, and that we warn that it is in Jesus' oration on the signs and chronology of the end time.
So the hierarchy that is in power now, some of it seen, some of it not seen. They're going to be, are they going to think they're in power, or are they going to be kind of divided up too amongst the different kingdoms?
It will be not a totally cohesive group. It may be reasonably cohesive amongst the splits of the 2-5 somehow, because there's on the metallic prophecy of empires in Daniel 2, there's 10 toes on 5 toes on each feet, and they may be working as an alliance against the other 5. But there may be even more rivalries than that, because again, in that prophecy, this is a empire that is of iron and of clay. And just as iron is strong and clay is of the earth, is that it will be strong, but it will also be brittle because it weakens the metal. So there's going to be conflict in those 10 kings. And I think that is sort of reflective of what happens, right from the beginning of this 7-year covenant that's brought about in the end time, the Hebrew word ketz for the end time in Daniel 9:26, for this 7 full years that are separated for all vision and prophecy and the coming of the true Messiah to be fulfilled. And that you have wars and things that are going to break out between those kings, and that's why you get this significant war before the midpoint of the last 7 years. So much so it looks like Armageddon, and a 200 million man war as it was counted in the army of Revelation 9. An army, as Joel 1 and 2 describes, as never seen the size of before or ever will be again. It's probably a bigger war from a size number of the armies than what Armageddon is going to be by what Joel 1 and 2 talks about. And yet we know it's not the Armageddon war because it comes in Joel 3 and it comes in Revelation 19 versus Ezekiel 38, 39, Joel 1 and 2, and Revelation 9.
So when do the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse come in?
I look at that as being from around the start of the last 7 years, either just before, right at, or just after. I lean to just a little bit before. And so one would presume then, with that type of dating, is that as in Revelation 2:10 talks about 10 days of tribulation that's coming, is Babylon will already have been in power and will sponsor the covenant that is going to cement that 10-king empire that's going to protect Israel from their enemies, and will begin doing a sacrifice on a wing of the temple, which is, you can't have that unless you have a universal religion. And they're going to be able to do that on a wing or an overspreading or an extremity of the temple, depending on which translation that you're reading in English. And so probably will be more closer to the edge of the valley between the two mountains, which is where Josephus located the Holy of Holies. And so that will be worked out through this universal religion. And that when we have the horses that are coming out in Revelation 6, there's certain aspects to each one of the horses, and so there's a conquest that is going about in Revelation 6 as these horses go throughout the earth. So what's interesting is that when you look at the pronouns that are used in these four riders of the horses in Revelation 6, is that word him or he, and words like that, that's the Greek word autos or otos. And it's a self-reflecting pronoun and understood as such as in this application as a baffling wind. And a wind is one of the definitions for pneuma as a spirit in Greek, or ruach as a spirit in Hebrew. And they come from the presence of the throne of God to go out through the earth. And these are the same types of beings that come out of Zechariah 6, these four chariots and riders, and they go through the earth. And these are called spirits from the throne of God. And that goes back to the Hebrew word ruach. This is the same description that is applied to, in my research, what I would do, I would apply that to the same understanding as an end-time prophecy, which Zechariah 6 is. And after Babylon has been set in place in Zechariah 5, and just as that ephah is set up in place in the book of Zechariah with Babylon or Shinar, you have this woman holding the same ephah or scales that are going to show up in one of the other writers in Revelation 6. I make all of those connections for people in book 1 without getting too much into the minutia of it. But these are the four winds of heaven. And these are the four winds that in the book of Daniel blow on the waters to have the beast empires rise out. These are the four winds that spread the lost tribes of Israel to the four corners of the earth and then collect them back. These are the four winds of prophecy. These are four archangels, I think, and I make a case for that in book 1, and that they come and they are part of the fulfillment of prophecy. And in Revelation 6, it's very interesting as you get the first rider that comes out, because it's such a interesting sort of passage, that when the first seal is open, you have this white horse, and the one that sat on him had a bow and a crown. And that's understood from an English modern sort of understanding of what a bow might stand for. So most people think, wow, this is a conquering rider, and this horse is going to go forth to conquer and to conquer. But this is more a reflection of the setup of Babylon, the 10 kings, and then the future Antichrist that's going to come to power at the midpoint. So that word bow, when you take that back to Greek, it doesn't mean a bow as in a weapon of war. It is quite a bit different. It is a word that means a very, very simple fabric. And it's the Greek word toxon. Or a bow is in a fabric of a bow, or how you might tie a bow. But in the ancient understanding, that was the robes of the kings. That was the robes of the gods. And so you can imagine, sort of put on an image of Roman and Greek kings and nobility. They're wearing these simple white fabrics. That word is a very interesting word that we need to look at, that this is more talking about the types of people that are going to be the emperors that are going to be wearing probably these simple fabrics to bring it back like it was of old. And that this has a meaning that is not, generally sort of talked about in the sense of that it's not a weapon. And then we need to understand that the word crown is the Greek word Stephanos. And this is a crown of thorns, as it's generally sort of understood. And it's a crown that was a mark of royals or royalty, an exalted rank people. And it was as a wreath or a garland that was given as a prize to champions in the Olympic Games, to Nephilim warriors. And this is the crown from the laurel tree that was understood where that crown was made out of, the branches of a laurel tree. And so, again, I talk about all of this in its detail in Book 2, but to give people an idea that that's not how people would generally understand Revelation 6:2. And so something else is going on here, and that they're going to be given this laurel crown. And laurel is also the same word as Lorraine, from where the Anjou come from. And the cross of Lorraine that people might be familiar with. And the King of Jerusalem title that's associated with the Lorraine region, just as the Habsburg Lorraine passed that King of Jerusalem title as part of the Anjou bloodline over to the Habsburgs, and then over to Juan Carlos and his son, who inherited now King Philippe of Spain, the Bourbon family, who have this King of Jerusalem title. And so we're going to see a return to the old empires that this is talking about.
Okay.
And then as it moves on, then you start to get in the second seal, then you're going to get another horse that's red, and as it's described and translated into English, and that's the horse that's going to take peace from the earth, and that there's going to be these wars, and so a great sword is brought on. So expect, as these empires are coming together, there's going to be these wars. But as I say, as you get into Revelation 6, you're going to get a significant war that's going to come about. And 25% of the people in the earth are going to be destroyed in that war. So there's a big war coming, but it's still not the war that's going to happen with the opening of the pit prison, and then as an extension out of that, you have the 200 million man army.
Well, I would kind of assume that if there were some authority that was going to say these 5 countries are going to be a kingdom, and these 5 countries are going to, I mean, I could see different countries rebelling against, the fact that they were being put into one kingdom.
There's going to be that going on as well, as those empires come together. Not all the countries are going to say, that we want to be part of that alliance, and we don't like how we're going to be ruled over, right? There's going to be that pushback as well.
And I can see Canada and the United States being smushed together, along with possibly Mexico and even South America. And how do you govern something that big?
Well, you might want to look at something like with China is the Li and Xi bloodlines established all of the royal kingdoms throughout Southeast Asia. And so there's going to be that as a premise, and then backed up by force that we're just taking you over, and that this is going to be part of what's going on all around the world. And it could be one successful play like that forces other countries into the same kind of mode. Not that there won't be a pushback on that. You could look at King Charles III, unless William takes over because he dies. But let's just stick with King Charles right now. He's the royal bloodline of the English Commonwealth, and that at one time included the United States, and now you have the Great Britain that has left Europe. And I used to think that Great Britain would be part of, the European community as, one or two groups of empires there, one in Middle Europa and one a Western Empire. But now it might be possible that you could bring that Commonwealth back together, just as, Francis Bacon and King James had envisioned, as part of that unicorn empire. And you have with Australia and New Zealand, and to a certain extent places like South Africa, but certainly Canada, the U.S., and the Commonwealth, you have that history that if we're going to have to unite for economic purposes and for military purposes and for protection, you might see that commonality of history and language come together. And that could be a very similar motivation for other countries around the world. So, Mexico, you could make an argument, might come with Canada, but it may not. It may be part of a separate Central American or Central and South American alliance. Or there might be two that sort of come out of that. But it's hard to know how that's going to eventually resolve, and it probably doesn't end up like the Club of Rome designed it, or how the United Nations, because once you start this in play, there's just too many unpredictable things.
Yeah, I would think. But then you have the tribulation.
Yeah.
And first of all, what is tribulation? And is everyone going to go through it, or do some get a free ride?
One of the things that we're told in Christianity is that to go to heaven, we're going to have to go through tribulation. And so we're not told we're going to be saved from tribulation in the end time. What we're told is two things. One, as in the book of Thessalonians, says that we're going to be saved from the coming wrath. And that's good, because nobody wants to be here for the year of the Lord's wrath and the wrath bowls and Armageddon. But that's in the last year of the last 7 years. The other thing that we're promised is that we're going to be saved from the time of temptation, or the time of trial, as some of the translations would say. And that's a time of testing. And it's a time that we're going to be saved from, because as Jesus talked about in his oration in the chronology, even the elect would be deceived. And so there's a specific period that we're going to be saved from, but we're going to go through tribulation. And that word, hour of temptation, in Revelation 3, is talking about a specific hour, and it's a time frame. It could be, a short period of time, as in a few weeks or whatever, but a short period of time. But specific word that is used in conjunction with the hour that the 10 kings in Revelation 17, it's the same Greek word hora, that the 10 kings give their power over to Antichrist, and he starts his completion of coming to power. It is the same hour that after he comes to power, he's going to destroy Babylon, which in Revelation 14, it's the first event in the summary of the last 3.5 years, with the details coming in Revelation 15 through 19 for the last 3.5 years. It's the first event of the last 3.5 years after the 144,000 first fruits are in heaven as part of the resurrection sequence of the Christ, the first fruits. And then when he comes, those who are still alive and those who died in Christ and weren't martyred, that's at the same time in that hour that is being talked about there. And that this hour of destruction of Babylon is the time we're told to come out of Babylon, come out of the world system, because the redemption is coming near. That's the hour. And then you have the hour of destruction in Babylon is described in the details in Revelation 18, and I think part of the three woes, as I also talk about in Book 2 as well in this last section. And so this is the same hour or hora that is reserved for when Jesus is coming back. And so all of that language, as it goes back to Greek, it connects itself back at a universal time, and that hour is when the mark of the beast is going to be implemented, that Revelation 13 talks about, when Antichrist comes to power and rules for 3.5 years. So it's in that time frame. So sometime after Antichrist comes to power at the abomination, as Matthew 24:15-20 talks about, and is talked about in the other orations recorded in Mark and Luke as well, and as timed in the book of Daniel, as in Daniel 9:27, at the midpoint of those last 7 years, and elsewhere in like Daniel 11 and Daniel 12, we'll get accountings of the abomination as well. And that after he's coming to power, probably after he's destroyed Babylon to replace that system and introduce his beast system of the mark of the beast system, and so that we don't have that temptation that could even deceive the elect with the credentials that Antichrist has, including this counterfeit Armageddon. That's what we're promised to be safe from. So if that's at, let's just say at the 3.5 year point for sake of math, although it could be a little bit longer into the last 3.5 years, and there was 10 days of tribulation that's talked about, then we're going to go through some tribulation, and a lot of us are going to die in those, say, 6.5 years that come in those 10 days of tribulation. And this is the tribulation of the saints. And a lot of people like to mix tribulation with wrath and say it's all the same. So that's what we're going to be saved from, the tribulation, which is the wrath. Well, it's not. They're different words. So, and there are specific words that are used. So, you know, in Greek, you have orge and thumos, which are used interchangeably for vengeance and anger and wrath, as they're translated into English, for that year of the Lord's wrath and the wrath bowls. But that's a different word than the Greek word thalipsis, which means tribulation. And that it is that we are said that we will go through tribulation, but not through the wrath. And so the tribulation is talked about in Revelation 6 and 7, where you have the martyrs that are told to wait that little season, the 3.5 years, for the first fruits to be martyred like they were, which is the 144,000, the 2 witnesses, and those who are going to testify before Jesus in the first 3.5 years that Jesus talks about in Matthew 24 in this affliction that people are going to have. And that word affliction is the Greek word thalipsis, but it's translated as affliction versus tribulation in Revelation 7 or Revelation 3. And then you're going to have 3.5 years after the abomination that is not the tribulation of the saints, but is the Great Tribulation not seen since the beginning of creation. And that's the word ellipses as well, but that's a separate tribulation. And it is the same as the Hebrew word Sarah for the time of Jacob's trouble, that he'll be saved out of the second Exodus and the second half of the last 7 years for Judah and Israel. So this is a destruction that's going to overcome the whole world, and it's going to lead into the year of the Lord's favor and the year of the Lord's wrath. And people say, well, the translators knew what they were doing. They took that word ellipses and they translated it as tribulation in Matthew 24:21, but appropriately translated it as affliction in Matthew 24, say verses 7 or 8. And you can make that case, but then you have the parallel passage in Mark 13:19, which again is talking about this great destruction not seen since the beginning of the world, only it doesn't say tribulation there, it says affliction. So that's the Great Tribulation as well, and it also goes back to the Greek word ellipses. We have some pretty poor translations or inconsistencies going on there that makes it confusing. So there'll be a tribulation for the saints, and it's part of the resurrection sequence that is fulfilled after the first 3.5 years, after the 144,000 are killed in Revelation 14, after the 2 witnesses are killed with their 3.5-year commission in Revelation 11, and then after the gospel is preached that Jesus talks about in Matthew 24, and the last of the preaching after the 144,000 comes with the great angel that's going to be in the sky preaching to the whole world, and then comes the destruction of Babylon in Revelation 14 with the summary of the last 3.5 years. So we need to understand that we should, as a Christian, pray and hope for a pre-tribulation rapture, but that's not what we're promised. And so we should pray for that, but we should prepare to go through tribulation. And then those who aren't raptured, they're going to have to earn their eternity. If we're really getting a lot of noise and feedback in the background from somewhere, but I'll continue. That there is a time where people whose faith were not strong enough, but they're not going to take the mark of the beast. And that's the way that they're going to earn their eternity, is with the rejection of taking the mark of the beast and or worshiping Satan or Antichrist in the last 3.5 years. And those will be part of a resurrection sequence that is starts with the millennium. It could probably happen before if they wanted it to, but they're in place when Jesus rules at the start of the millennium and rules with Jesus as part of their reward. And so connecting that back to the reconciliation of Israel and Judah after they accept Jesus, after they recognize Jesus is the one that they're pierced, and after Israel has been awakened, the lost tribes that were lost with the dispersion in 721 BC by Assyria, they're going to be awakened and they're going to be in prison, and they're going to come back and recognize Jesus as their Messiah, just as Judah will. And that's the time that Israel is saved out of in the time of Jacob's trouble, the Hebrew word sarah for affliction, trouble, tribulation. And that's the same word that is used in Daniel 12 after the abomination, when, and this is a prophecy being spoken to the people of Judah and to the lost tribes of Israel, that they will have their resurrection and their judgment at that time in the last 3.5 years, which is in accordance and parallel with the second Exodus that is going to take place, led by Jesus and King David from around the world, back to meet Judah in the wilderness, who had fled at the midpoint of the last 7 years, as Matthew 24, 15 to 20 talks about. And so that's a separate resurrection for them in time as being part of the bride for the supper of the Lamb just before Armageddon. And that's going to happen in the year of the Lord's favor. So the words line up if you match up the words that are used in Greek to words that are used in the Hebrew and use them the exact same way for the same types of events, that you can start to use that to mark some of the timing. But we need to understand that we're going to go through tribulation, and when we're told to prepare for that.
Okay. Now you've said tribulation a gazillion times, and I still don't know what it is. I mean, I've got an idea, but is it struggle? Is it hunger? Is it pain? Is it punishment? Is it torture? What is tribulation?
All the above. That the Christians will be persecuted. They will be thrown in jail. They will be killed. They will be turned on by people within their church. They will be turned on by and turned in by family members. They will die for their testimony in the first 3.5 years of the last 7. And this is a time of testing. This is a time that we need to stand up and testify, but we'll testify even on to death. And so we'll be in jails, we'll be in concentration camps, we will be mocked, you name it, anything to do with persecution and a mass slaughter of unbelievable proportions, that's what we're going to see. And yet the Great Tribulation will be even worse for the world.
Makes you wonder, why would God do that to us?
He's not doing that to us. We're doing it to ourselves.
Well, it seems to me he could have put a stop to it someplace.
He could have, but all of this is designed to indict the fallen angels, the spurious offspring, and to have humankind understand that we have to make choices here and we have to choose what we believe. And so when you look at the God Most High that gives the ultimate gift of the gift of life and then leaves it in our hands to choose, do we want that to be extended or not? And nobody will have an excuse that they didn't have a choice. And it's the same rules throughout the generations. And it's the same things that are happening throughout the cycle, that the spurious ones, the offspring of the fallen angels, are leading the world into destruction in cycles. That's what they're here to do. They're here to wipe us from the face of the earth. And they're trying to make sure that even if they can't win, they're going to try and make sure to try and bring about the end time before the end time so that not all the names would be fulfilled. They are that vengeful that they would love to bring about the end time before the ordained time. But, of course, they can't. But they'll try. But their ideology is, number one, wipe us from the face of the earth so that we can't reach our destiny and or ensure that not everybody gets there, whether that is through deceiving them along the way or not having them have a chance to be born.
So I want to go back again for a minute. 1,000 years of peace. Jesus is here with us, sharing love and all of that stuff, and yet we rebel. Do we rebel because there are more fallen angels, or there are more? All right. Satan is released after that 1,000 years. Does he suddenly muster an army of Nephilim or spirits who are of the beast and instill them within people that have now been living for 1,000 years in peace?
So it's some interesting language that is in there. So let me just sort of back up a step for a second. So
Sure.
in Matthew 25, what we know is that the lake of fire was reserved for Satan and his angels that followed him. And so all but Satan of the angels are going to be in that lake of fire. And that's a forever thing. And that the second death that happens at the end of Revelation 12 for humans, after the judgment, if they're not judged to be worthy to go on, versus the ones that have already been resurrected and already have that reward. And I'm referencing that open door crack that the book of Romans talks about in terms of the judgment of what's in their heart will be the law that they'll be judged by if they didn't know about Jesus or know about God. And that second death is reserved for humans, so not torture forever within the lake of fire. And the demons, which have a counterfeit immortal spirit, they would be cast into the lake of fire at Armageddon as well. So all you have left is Satan and the humans. That would be part of the millennium. Now, we're going to have some survivors on the earth other than Israel who are being protected in the desert. And that's also when they go through their judgment and the resurrection in Ezekiel 37 of the dry bones. And as you get into the teens of that passage is the second Exodus, and understand that matches up with Daniel 12:1, and at the time of the Exodus passages like in Jeremiah 37 with the time of Jacob's trouble. And so there's going to be people that are Gentile as well as Israel and Judah that survive into the millennial reign. But we're not told that there are giants that are going to be there, but because we get passages like in Psalms 21:8, where that whole seed line is going to be destroyed in the wrath fire and destroyed from the face of the earth, and their seed from among children. And also in Isaiah 25:5, that this is the branch of the terrible ones that are brought low at that time and destroyed from the face of the earth. Again, at the Mount Hermon and Armageddon battle of Revelation 19. That's the actual physical war and the day of Armageddon versus the year of Armageddon. So what else might be at play here? Well, we get a small hint in there that after he's loosed, he's going to go to the four corners of the earth to collect Gog and Magog to gather them to battle in this end time war. And they're going to march on Jerusalem, and then that army is absolutely destroyed, and then Satan is cast into the lake of fire. So interesting that it's Gog and Magog. And again, as we talked about in shows past, Gog is not part of the table of nations, and Gog would be a name of a giant. And in Ezekiel 38, Gog is described as Gog of Magog, chief prince of Meshech. And so you have this Gog and Magog that are present there. So the only thing I can deduce from that is that from the Gentiles, there's going to be descendants of the nation of Gog and Magog. So it's because it's Gog of Magog and chief prince of Meshech. Meshech would be sort of understood as the etymological source for the city of Moscow. And these would be the Scythians that would have migrated into the Ukraine, into Kiev to set up the first czars of Russia and the Ukraine, and then set up Moscow as its branch city with Vladimir the Great that the Romanovs took over in 1600 through intermarriage. So a scion or a junior offshoot of the Putyanin bloodline but use the name of Romanov through intermarriage. So you have a connection there that there are Gentiles that are represented probably in Gog and Magog, and specifically from the Scythians, the Indo-Aryans or giants, as in some maybe perhaps DNA that still exists in some sort of secret sort of history or legacy that they still sort of cling to, that would lead them to say, when Satan comes along, that they'll believe him again for some reason, that they could win this war and rule the earth themselves, and he would be their God. It's we'll have to, you would have to see the times to really understand how that could come about. It's kind of akin to looking at from our viewpoint as what shapes up to be like the end time, but trying to figure that out 500 years ago or 200 years ago or 100 years ago. We can't really imagine what all the dynamics would be to bring that about, but it's in direct conflict and opposition to the reign of Jesus that would be a reign of righteousness. But one presumes that survivors, so like us, we are stiff-necked. We have that rebellious nature in us, and that would continue. And it's a very humbling aspect for the inheritors of eternity to consider.
Definitely. The other thing I wanted to hit on before we run out of time, you speak often of bowls, of emptying a bowl of this or a bowl of that. Are we talking literal bowls, or are we talking just a way of saying this is poured out onto humanity?
Yeah, it's to me, it's an allegory of the releasing of the final depths of our depravity and the people who rule this earth. So these bowls that pour out these catastrophes is just really lifting that lid. And this begins with the reign of Antichrist, who declares himself to be God and does as he chooses and is trying to change the times. And so we get similar words that are used in the Old Testament, but you could translate this as, a cup or a grail or a goblet as well. And as it would be used akin in the Old Testament. But it is not, it's used as a way to separate and make the distinction that even though it's the same catastrophes, it's a different dosage than the trumpets or the opening of the seals with the seal catastrophes. Exact same catastrophes, just stronger doses. And this is the full measure of that dose within the bowl of Hygeia, for example, as in the bowl of, pharmaceuticals. It's it's the poison that is come to full potency in the last, 3.5 years, and ultimately the last year where it's coming to a full head. And even Antichrist empire is starting to rebel against him. And, I walk through that as well. And so if people want to get a little bit more detail on that, you just read, go to Daniel 11, and after about, let's say about verse 30, you're going to have the sequence of events that Antichrist does in the last year, and he's basically warring still around the world. He's promised peace, but he is going to war with other probably rebellious kings, even after they gave him his power. And then he turns to go to Mount Hermon, and that's because he sees somebody, from the east and the north. And as Isaiah 41 talks about, that's Jesus who is coming in the end time from the east and the north. And so he's going to march up the west side of the Jordan River and sit on that side below Mount Hermon. And who he's going to be seeing is Jesus as he starts off in Edom. And he's going to be taking out specific retribution as he starts to grind the wine press against the sins that Edom did against Israel. And just as Antichrist is moving up the west side, he's going to take care of other countries, and it's recorded in Daniel and other prophecies in Daniel 11 and other prophecies in the Old Testament, where he's going to destroy, Antichrist will destroy the Philistines as he's marching up. And also Jesus, as he's going north, he is going to go through Moab and Ammon, which were descendants from Lot, who did things against Israel as well, and that's going to be taken care of. And so this is, the passages where it's talking in the Old Testament where Jesus, or Jehovah of the Elohim, the word logos of the God Theos in the Old Testament, the Jehovah of the Elohim, he's going to show up first in Isaiah 34, where you have all these other interesting creatures at Armageddon who are basically celebrating the destruction of the world and their last time before going to the lake of fire. Jehovah is going to begin in Bozrah and then Taman in Mount Seir. And then he's going to be moving north, and then Antichrist is going to see that he's come and what he's doing. He's going to go to meet him at the mountain of assembly, as you would understand Armageddon in the original Hebrew that I explained quite a few times throughout the book 2, so that people understand the meaning of the word and how it relates to the gathering of the armies at the holy mountain of the fallen angels, where they swore the oath of Haram Anathema to carry it out to the end, no matter the consequences. And that Mount Hermon is the name that was renamed for Mount Zaphon, as it's known in the Ugaritic text, Nippur in Samaria, or Sion in the Bible, or Sirion and Shinir. It was changed to reflect that curse of Haram Anathea, Haram. And so Hermonim, as it would be pronounced with the CH, as you take that back to its Hebrew, is a derivative word from Haram, which is Charam or Cherem or AM with the latter. And that was the name applied to the mountain of the curse, which was originally a sacred mountain, which is another meaning for Haram and Mount Hermon as well. So it encapsulates the full meaning, and that's where the assembly of the gods is located. That's where the assembly of the Detanu, of the original giants assembly, of the ones given divine right to rule there over the 70 nations of the earth, both before and after the flood. And that's where the branch of the terrible ones is going to be decided at the Armageddon battle, as Isaiah 25 talks about.
Wow. Well, we have a lot to look forward to, clearly.
We live in interesting times, as they say.
We do. We absolutely do. And you've pulled it beautifully. How long does the Battle of Armageddon take?
It's a day. I think it's more the time it takes to get the armies there, not only Antichrist armies, but all the demons have to go out, as is talked about in Revelation 16 with the wrath bowls being poured out, that they have to go to all the kings of the earth and do miracles to entice them to gather at the mountain of assembly for that battle. So I think there's more time involved. It's got to be, probably takes 3 to 6 months to gather all the armies there. Maybe, 3 months might be closer to it. But the battle doesn't last long, because as they start to attack Jesus and his army, you have this huge double-edged sword come out and it kills everybody instantaneously. I mean, it won't take long. But the build-up takes a while. Yeah.
well, speaking of going,
one might presume that the heads of the terrible ones will all be chopped off with that sword.
I would think.
Yep.
Can you let everybody know where they can get a hold of you and your books and order them if they want to?
Yes, so the best way to get a hold of me, if you want to ask me a question or request a document on a specific topic, if I have that document, I'll send it to you. If not, I'll answer your question no matter what you ask. Get a hold of me through my website, the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6, the number 6conspiracy.com. And on that website, there is a contact the author. That's where you would try and contact me. And it may take me a couple of months to get back to you, but I will get back to you. I'm working hard to shorten that list as I start to catch up on my time after the release of book 2. And I'll try and get that down to 3 to 4 weeks the way it used to be. So be patient in the meantime. And if you want to get a feel for the book, a closer feel for book 1 or book 2, I have a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of book 1 on the website. So click on to book 1 about the book and book 2 for book 2 to see that. And if you wanted to buy a signed copy, you can buy that directly from my website. So go to buy now, click on book 1 or book 2. And there are price discounts for buying multiple books. Now, if you wanted to buy a combination of both, I don't have those bundled together for the discount, but let's say you wanted 4 books and you wanted 2 of each, just buy 4 of one, send me an email through the website, and I will split that book, that purchase up 2 and 2 or 3 and 1, however you ask for that. So that's the way to get the discount and to combine that on the bundling. And I have a page up there for the U.S. So if you live in the U.S., you click on that page for book 1 or book 2. And if the card gets rejected for some reason, a lot of times it's an international purchase security system in place by the credit card company. I live in Canada, so if it gets declined, contact the credit card company and they'll take that off for you. And it's just one quick phone call. And I have an international page for the rest of the world other than Canada, and I have a special page for Canada. And so go to your appropriate page to buy the book. And if you wanted to buy the digital version, you can link over from that buy now page for book 1 or book 2 to get the Kindle product. You can also link over to barnesandnoble.com, to amazon.com, and amazon.ca to buy the purchase the book, and it takes you right to that purchase site on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And we will hopefully have book 1 up on audio for the end of June or early July. Looks like the end of June at this point. I'm reviewing chapters as we speak. And book 2 will be available through Amazon ACX by August or September. And I'll try and get links of that up. I'm told that I can, so you'll be able to link right to Amazon through the website.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. This has been such an exciting 7 weeks, and I'm looking forward to 8 weeks in the fall. Thank you so much, Gary.
Well, it's been my absolute pleasure. So hopefully, some of the things that we've talked about will attract people's interest or have answered some questions. But what I would say to people is to learn as much as you can and make your own decision why we're here. It's important because no decision is a decision. So learn about it and make your own decision, please.
Absolutely. Thank you again, and thank you everybody for listening. Please enjoy all 7 of these shows. And my best is read the section, listen to the interview, go back and read it again, and you'll find you're learning twice as much. Thanks so much for joining us, and I will see you next Monday. Good night now.